Have you ever wondered why the stock market hits record highs while your local grocery store prices are skyrocketing and your bank account is slowly draining to zero? You've been told that inflation affects everyone equally, but there is a hidden economic mechanism called the Cantillon Effect that ensures the elite profit from every new dollar printed. While you're struggling to keep up with the rising cost of living, the people closest to the printing press are using freshly created money to buy up the world before you even see a penny. And today, we expose the 300-year-old secret that explains why the financial system is mathematically designed to make the rich richer at the direct expense of your hard. The Cantillon Effect is named after Richard Cantillon, an 18th century banker who realized that the person who receives new money first has an unfair advantage over everyone else in society. When a central bank like the Federal Reserve prints trillions of dollars, that money does not enter the economy all at once or distribute itself evenly among the working class. Instead, the new money flows through a specific hierarchy, starting with the government and the massive commercial banks that are at the very center of the financial web. These first receivers get to spend the new money at current market prices, before the influx of currency has had a chance to drive up the cost of goods and services. They use this supercharged capital to buy up stocks, real estate, and other hard assets, driving the prices higher before the rest of the population even knows what is happening. By the time that money trickles down to you in the form of a small salary increase or a stimulus check, the prices of bread, gas, and rent have already skyrocketed. This means that you are effectively being forced to buy assets and essentials at new prices using old wages that have already lost a massive chunk of their purchasing power. The Cantillon Effect is essentially a silent wealth transfer that moves value from the pockets of the poor and middle class directly into the balance sheets of the banking elite. Most people think of inflation as a general increase in prices, but it is actually a distortion of the economy that rewards those who live closest to the source of the money. If you are a W-2 employee living on a fixed income, you are at the very end of the Cantillon chain, making you the primary victim of every single dollar the government prints. This is why the gap between the ultra-wealthy and the working class has exploded over the last 50 years, as the printing presses have gone into overdrive to fund corporate bailouts. Every time the government saves the economy with a new round of stimulus, they are actually diluting the value of your labor and handing the profit to their friends on Wall Street. The people at the top of the pyramid get the benefit of the new money without the pain of the inflation, while the people at the bottom get the pain without the benefit. Think of it like a sourdough starter. The person who adds the water and flour first gets the most growth, while the person at the end is left with a thin, watery mixture. This explains why luxury real estate and high-end art prices soar during economic crises, while the average family is struggling to pay for basic electricity and heating. The first receivers are using the money to acquire productive assets that will appreciate in value, while the last receivers are using it just to survive another month. The system is designed to reward capital over labor, because capital has the luxury of moving fast, while labor is trapped by the slow pace of salary negotiations. You cannot negotiate your way out of the Cantillon Effect because the prices you pay are determined by the people who have already spent the new money months ago. This is the invisible tax that requires no vote in Congress and no signature on a tax return, yet it steals more wealth from you than any other policy in history. Central bankers talk about price stability, but their actual goal is to manage the speed of this wealth transfer so that the public doesn't realize they are being robbed. If the transfer happened too fast, there would be riots in the streets. So they keep it at a slow, steady 2% crawl to ensure the frog never jumps out of the boiling pot. The Cantillon Effect turns the stock market into a giant siphon where the savings of the middle class are slowly pulled upward into the hands of institutional investors and hedge funds. When you see the NASDAQ hitting all-time highs during a global pandemic or a war, you are seeing the Cantillon Effect in its purest and most destructive form. The money isn't reflecting real economic growth or innovation. It is simply reflecting the massive amount of new currency that has been injected at the top of the system. You are being told that the economy is doing great because the indicators the elite care about are green, even though the indicators you care about are all red. This disconnect between Wall Street and Main Street is not an accident. It is a structural necessity for the Cantillon Effect to continue functioning effectively. The banking elite want you to believe that money is a store of value, but for them, it is a tool for asset acquisition before that value evaporates into thin air. Every dollar you save in a traditional bank account is a losing bet against the people who have the power to print that same dollar for free whenever they want. The cost of living doesn't just go up on its own, it is pushed up by the flood of new money that competes for the same limited supply of houses, food, and energy. The Cantillon Effect creates a new feudalism, where a small group of people own the means of production while the rest of society is forced to rent their existence from them. It destroys the social contract by making it impossible for a young person to buy a home or start a family through honest, hard work, and disciplined saving. We are being trained to be consumers who spend our money as fast as possible because the system knows that holding on to paper currency is a guaranteed path to poverty. This creates a high-velocity culture where everyone is stressed, everyone is in a rush, and no one has the time to ask why their life is becoming more expensive every year. The elite use the Cantillon Effect to buy up the real world, while they keep the masses focused on the digital world of social media and endless entertainment distractions. When a big tech company gets a low-interest loan that you can't access, they use that money to automate your job, making the Cantillon Effect a double-edged sword for the worker. They get the cheap money to buy the robots, and you get the expensive prices and a pink slip, leaving you with no way to compete in the new economic landscape. Historically, the Cantillon Effect has been the primary driver behind every major empire's collapse, as the wealth concentration at the top becomes too heavy for the base to support. We are currently in the late stage of this cycle, where the injections of new money have to be larger and more frequent just to keep the system from imploding on itself. The financialization of everything means that even your basic human needs like water and shelter have become speculative assets for the first receivers of new money. You are no longer a citizen in their eyes. You are a yield-generating asset that is being harvested through the slow and steady dilution of your currency's value. The middle class was the only group that could challenge this system, which is why the Cantillon Effect is specifically designed to hollow out the middle first. It leaves behind a barbell economy with a tiny group of ultra-wealthy owners at one end and a massive group of struggling, debt-burdened renters at the other. Every time you hear the phrase quantitative easing, you should translate it in your head to Cantillon theft, because that is exactly what is happening to your future. The bankers at the Federal Reserve are not your protectors. They are the gatekeepers who decide who gets the fresh money first and who gets the inflation last. They use complex academic language to hide the simplicity of the crime, making it seem like you just aren't smart enough to understand why you are getting poor. But the math is simple. If you create more units of a currency, each unit becomes less valuable, and the person who gets the units first wins the game. This is why the rich are buying up thousands of acres of farmland and thousands of single-family homes, because they know the paper money is becoming a liability. They are trading their digital illusions for physical reality, before the rest of the world realizes that the digital illusions have no actual backing or intrinsic value. The Cantillon Effect is the reason why your father could support a family on one salary, while you and your partner struggle to pay the bills with two high-level careers. You aren't less productive than your father. In fact, you're likely 10 times more productive, but the Cantillon Effect has stolen the surplus value of your labor. It is the ghost in the machine that turns every economic boom into a wealth transfer and every economic bust into a corporate consolidation of power. We are told that innovation drives the stock market, but if you remove the trillions in printed money, most of these innovative companies would be bankrupt overnight. They are zombie corporations that only exist because they are close enough to the Cantillon fountain to receive the cheap credit they need to stay alive. Meanwhile, the small business owner on Main Street has to pay full interest rates and deal with the rising costs of supplies, making it impossible for them to compete. The system is picking winners and losers based on proximity to power, rather than proximity to value, which is the death of a true meritocratic society. This creates a cynical generation that realizes the game is rigged and decides to stop playing by the rules of thrift, hard work, and long-term planning. When the currency is being manipulated at the top, the only rational behavior at the bottom is to gamble, spend, and take on as much debt as the system will allow. This social rot is the ultimate consequence of the Cantillon Effect, leading to a breakdown in trust between the citizens and the institutions that are supposed to serve them. You must recognize that the inflation you see at the grocery store is just the final footprint of a crime that was committed months ago in the boardrooms of Wall Street. Every time the price of a gallon of milk goes up, it is because a billionaire used first money to buy something else, driving up the overall price level of the entire economy. The Cantillon Effect is a one-way street where the wealth only moves up, and the consequences of the printing only move down toward the most vulnerable people. It is the economic gravity that ensures that no matter how hard you run on the treadmill, you stay in the same place while the people owning the gym get richer. To fight back, you must stop thinking like a consumer and start thinking like a first receiver by moving your wealth into assets that the system cannot easily print. If you stay in cash, you're choosing to be the victim of the next round of the Cantillon Effect, which is already being planned by the central banks of the world. The system depends on your financial illiteracy to continue this theft, which is why they never teach you the Cantillon Effect in the public school system. They want you to blame the greedy corporations or the foreign enemies for high prices, rather than looking at the printing press that is right under their own noses. The great deception of our time is that the currency is a neutral medium of exchange, when in reality it is a highly biased tool of social and economic control. We are entering a terminal phase where the Cantillon effect will become so obvious that even the most distracted person will begin to question the reality of their money. When the central bank digital currencies arrive, the Cantillon effect will be automated, allowing them to decide exactly who gets to spend and who has to wait in line. This is the ultimate goal of the Great Reset, a world where the elite have total Cantillon control over every transaction and every life on the planet. The history of the economic historian is a warning that those who ignore the mechanics of money are destined to become the collateral damage of those who master it. You have to decide today if you will remain a last receiver or if you will take the steps necessary to protect your family from the coming wave of monetary dilution. The Cantillon effect is a monster that lives in the dark, and by shining a light on it, you take away its power to quietly steal your time and your freedom. Stop working for a currency that is working against you, and start building a life that is independent of the printing presses of the banking elite. The treadmill is accelerating, the walls are closing in, and the only way out is to understand the rules of the game before the game decides you are no longer needed. Wake up and see the siphon, because once you understand the Cantillon effect, you can never look at your paycheck or your bank account the same way again.
To truly understand how the Cantillon effect is stripping you of your future, you must look at the housing market, where institutional investors are using zero-interest credit to outbid families for every single family home, while you are saving for a down payment in a currency that loses value every day. Giant hedge funds are receiving freshly printed billions at the top of the chain to buy real estate in bulk before you can even make an offer. This is why the dream of home ownership has turned into a nightmare of permanent rent, as the first receivers of new money have turned the basic human need for shelter into a speculative asset class for the elite. When the Federal Reserve buys mortgage-backed securities, they are directly pumping money into the banking sector, allowing lenders to keep prices artificially high even when the average person's wages are completely stagnant. You are essentially competing in an auction where the person sitting next to you has a literal printing press in their basement, ensuring that you will always be the one who pays the highest price for the smallest return. The stock market has become a Cantillon casino, where the price of a share no longer reflects the profit or innovation of a company, but rather the amount of liquidity that has been injected into the financial plumbing. Most people believe they are investing in the future of technology, but in reality, they are just chasing the tail end of a massive wave of monetary expansion that started months ago at the central bank level. This creates a wealth illusion where your 401k seems to be growing, but when you measure that growth against the skyrocketing cost of healthcare and education, you realize you are actually losing ground every single year. The Cantillon effect ensures that by the time retail investors get excited about a market rally, the smart money at the top has already moved their profits into hard assets and left you holding the bag. We must address the stimulus deception of 2020, where the government handed out a few $100s to the public while simultaneously pumping trillions into the balance sheets of the largest corporations in the world. You were told the stimulus was for you, but it was actually a cover story to allow the greatest wealth transfer in human history to take place, right under your nose without a single protest. For every dollar that ended up in a worker's pocket, thousands of dollars ended up in the hands of the first receivers, who used that capital to buy up the supply chains and the resources you depend on to survive. This is why we saw the K-shaped recovery, where billionaires added trillions to their net worth while small businesses were forced to close their doors forever due to rising costs and restricted credit access. The zombie economy is a direct result of the Cantillon effect, where failing companies are kept alive by cheap money while productive. Smaller competitors are starved of the capital they need to grow and innovate. If the system was truly a meritocracy, these failing giants would be allowed to collapse. But because they are too close to the press, they are given a permanent lifeline at the expense of your purchasing power. The Cantillon effect also distorts the price signal, which is the most important information in a free market, making it impossible for anyone to know the true value of anything anymore. When prices are distorted by fresh money, entrepreneurs make bad decisions and consumers overextend themselves, leading to a massive misallocation of capital that eventually causes a total systemic breakdown. You are living in a funhouse mirror economy, where up is down and debt is considered wealth, all because the unit of measurement, the dollar, is being constantly manipulated at the source. We must also look at the tech monopoly fueled by the Cantillon effect, where companies with zero profit are valued at billions because they have access to the inner circle of venture capital, and bank credit. These companies use their first money advantage to crush competition, not through better products, but through the sheer ability to burn cash that the average small business owner simply cannot access. This centralization of power is the ultimate goal of the Cantillon chain, as it slowly removes the independent player from the board and replaces them with corporate subsidiaries of the banking elite. The inflationary siphon is also visible in the luxury car market, where the prices of Ferraris and Porsches have outpaced inflation by a wide margin as the elite scramble to spend their new money. They are not buying these cars because they love driving. They are buying them because they are mobile stores of value that are safer than holding a currency that is being printed into oblivion. Meanwhile, the average person is forced to take out an A-tier loan just to afford a basic used car to get to a job that doesn't pay enough to cover the interest on that very loan. This is the dual reality of the Cantillon Effect. A world of infinite abundance for those at the top, and a world of increasing scarcity and desperation for everyone else at the bottom. The Cantillon elite don't want you to understand this, because once you see the mechanism, you stop blaming your neighbor for your poverty and start looking at the people behind the curtain. They use social engineering to make us fight over crumbs, while they are quietly moving the entire bakery into their private vaults through the power of monetary expansion. To survive the Cantillon effect, you must adopt the owner mindset and realize that holding cash in a high inflation environment is the equivalent of holding an ice cube in the middle of a desert. You must move as far up the asset chain as possible, acquiring things that cannot be printed, diluted, or easily manipulated by a central committee of unelected bankers in Washington. This includes physical gold and silver, which have acted as the natural counter to the Cantillon effect for thousands of years by providing a fixed supply of real, tangible wealth. When you hold physical bullion, you are opting out of the hierarchy of money and placing yourself on a level playing field with the most powerful institutions in the world. Bitcoin is also viewed by many as a digital escape from the Cantillon effect, because its fixed supply of 21 million units makes it impossible for any elite group to dilute your share. Unlike the dollar, which can be printed for free by a small group of people, Bitcoin requires proof of work, which is a digital way of ensuring that no one gets the money for free. This is why the banking elite are so terrified of decentralized assets. They remove the first receiver advantage that has been the foundation of their power since the 18th century. The Great Reset is an attempt to fix this leak in their system by introducing central bank digital currencies that give them total control over who receives money and when. With a CBDC, they can literally program the Cantillon effect, ensuring that their favorite industries get the stimulus while your digital wallet is restricted based on your social behavior. This is the final evolution of the money trap, where the wealth transfer is no longer a side effect of printing, but a deliberate and automated feature of the currency itself. You must start building your parallel economy today, by trading your skills, your time, and your assets for things that have intrinsic value outside of the traditional banking system. Stop measuring your progress in dollar amounts and start measuring it in purchasing power and the ability to self-sustain without a line of credit from a predatory lender. The economic historian teaches us that every society that allowed its currency to be corrupted at the top eventually suffered a total collapse of its social and moral fabric. When money becomes easy for the elite, life becomes hard for the honest worker, and the very concept of truth begins to disappear from the public discourse. This is why we see the rise of fake everything, fake news, fake food, and fake wealth, because the very foundation of our value system has been turned into a lie by the printing press. The Cantillon effect is the original sin of modern finance, and it is the primary reason why hard work is no longer enough to achieve the American dream in the 21st century. We are told to be patient and wait for our turn, but in a Cantillon system, your turn never comes because the deck is being constantly reshuffled by the dealer. You must realize that you are being hunted by an inflationary predator that is designed to eat your savings while you sleep and your wages while you work. The only way to win is to stop playing their game and start building your own fortress of wealth that is based on scarcity rather than abundance of paper. Look at the agriculture land grabs happening right now, where billionaires are buying up thousands of acres of soil with the first money they receive from their asset-backed loans. They know that when the paper fire finally consumes the economy, the only things left with value will be the things you can touch, eat, or use to produce energy. They are trading digital fiction for physical reality at a record pace. And you should be doing the exact same thing with whatever resources you have available to you. Every dollar you spend on a depreciating liability is a dollar you have handed back to the people at the top of the Cantillon chain to use against you in the next cycle. The subscription economy we discussed is just a way for the Cantillon elite to ensure that even if you get some money, it flows back to them every 30 days like clockwork. They want you to be a cash flow stream for their corporations, rather than a capital accumulator for your own family's legacy and future generations. We must recognize that debt is the transmission fluid of the Cantillon effect, allowing the new money to move through the system while leaving the interest burden on the middle class. When you take out a loan, you are essentially agreeing to be a slave to the bank's first money advantage, paying them back with harder dollars in the future. The system loves a high credit score debtor because you are the most efficient way for them to move their printed wealth into the real economy while collecting a fee. To break the chain, you must become debt-free and asset-heavy, which is the exact opposite of what every commercial and advertisement is telling you to do. They want you leveraged and stressed because a stressed person doesn't have the mental bandwidth to investigate the mechanics of their own economic enslavement. The Cantillon effect is a time thief, stealing the hours you spent working away from your family and giving that time to someone who did nothing but stand near a printer dot. This is the ultimate moral hazard, where the people who contribute the least to society are given the most power to dictate the direction and the values of that society. We are seeing a crisis of meaning because the link between effort and reward has been severed by the constant manipulation of the currency by the banking elite. When a teenager makes millions from a meme coin while a surgeon struggles to pay off medical school debt, you are witnessing the terminal insanity of a Cantillon-driven world. It creates a society of gamblers rather than builders. As people realize that speculation is the only way to outrun the silent theft of their purchasing power, this casino culture is the final stage of every collapsing fiat empire, where the search for easy money replaces the commitment to excellence and production. You must resist the urge to gamble and instead focus on preservation, protecting what you have already earned from the predatory reach of the central bank's policies. The Cantillon effect is the gravity of poverty, and unless you have a rocket of assets, you will inevitably be pulled down into the working poor regardless of your income. Every time you hear a politician promise free stuff, remember that the money to pay for it will be printed, and the Cantillon effect will ensure you pay for it twice in higher prices. There is no free lunch in economics. There is only a shifted cost that always lands on the shoulders of the person who is furthest away from the printing press. We are entering a period of mass awakening, where the average person is finally starting to feel the heat of the printing press through the cost of living crisis in the USA. This awareness is the greatest threat to the elite, which is why they are working so hard to censor alternative finance and economic history from the public internet. They want to keep you in a state of confusion, blaming the supply chain or corporate greed for the very inflation that they are creating in their own boardrooms. But once you see the Cantillon siphon, you realize that all of those other explanations are just noise designed to keep you from looking at the signal of the money supply. The history of the economic historian is a map that shows us where we are in the cycle. And right now, we are at the point where the wealth transfer becomes unsustainable. This is the moment where the first receivers begin to turn on each other, as the amount of real wealth left to harvest starts to dwindle in a hollowed-out economy. You must be prepared for the final flush, where the paper markets collapse and only those with direct ownership of real-world assets will be able to survive the transition. Reclaim your economic sovereignty by understanding that your most valuable asset is not your bank balance, but your ability to see through the lies of the financial system. Stop being a victim of the effect and start being a student of the solution, building a life that is resilient to the coming shocks of a dying currency regime. The Cantillon effect is a tool of empire, and like all tools of empire, it will eventually break under the weight of its own arrogance and systemic corruption. Your goal is to be positioned for the aftermath, holding the hard assets that will serve as the KC seed capital for the new world that will emerge from the ruins of the old one. The elite are buying gold, the nations are buying gold, and the smart money is exiting the dollar. It is time for you to do exactly what the people at the top are doing. Wake up and see the rigged game for what it is, because in the history of money, the truth is always revealed eventually, and the truth is that your freedom is non-negotiable.